Scenes have rules, and one of the key aspects of scene structure is pacing. Pacing is defined as the speed at which information is presented to the reader. I'll repeat that. Pacing is defined as the speed at which information is presented to the reader. It's about controlling the rhythm and speed at which a story unfolds. It's how quickly or slowly events happen and how much time is spent on different parts of the story. Because remember, narrative is made up of pace and story. Plot is narrative is made up of plot and story. Plot is what needs to happen no matter what, and story is how it unfolds through the emotional experiences and choices of the characters. So how quickly or slowly events happen and how much time is spent on different parts of the story. So basically, anything you want to filter moments through your characters, and that's where you create the pacing. Okay, think of it like a tempo of a song. A fast-paced song is like a rock song, full of energy and excitement, whereas a slow-paced story is more like a ballad with a deliberate and thoughtful rhythm to the unfolding of the experience. Control the pace of your scenes. We're going to talk about some tips. Okay, so hopefully, and we're going to give a real-time example. I'm going to break down some of the rules, and then I'm going to show you the rules in effect, and then allow you to see what it actually looks like when we break it down to see the speed at which information is presented to the reader. Okay, but Thomas, can you really? I still don't know what pacing is. So what is it? Okay, well, like I said at the top, pacing at its core is literally just the speed at which information is presented to the reader. Pacing refers to how fast or slow a scene feels to the reader, but what does that even mean? It's how you control the flow of information, the level of action, and the emotional depth of each moment. Fast-paced scenes often convey urgency, action, or danger, but giving you just enough information to keep you in the know through context and keep it moving. Whereas slower scenes will be a bit more in depth. It'll slow it down to allow us to dive into the essence of the moment and allow reflection, okay? Character development or emotional connection. Slow pace gives us substance to the context. Fast pace gives us context to maintain movement. Every aspect of writing, including scene length, dialogue, and descriptions, will influence your pacing. Pacing is not dedicated to your prose, it's dedicated to every element of writing. Okay? Which means you need to ask yourself, how long should a scene be? Too short and the reader may feel rushed. Too long and they might be like, hey, I'm bored and we keep it going. You can set it, you can see it in dialogue too. And that creates the stress of knowing how much dialogue there should be. Too much and the story can slow down. Too little and the characters may seem flat. Sure, maybe you got the dialogue down, but you are filling pages up with detailed descriptions. Too much description, and the story can feel bogged down. Too little, and the reader may not be able to visualize the scene. Because remember, you have to leave enough for the reader to imagine in their mind. So they're a part of it, you know? The truth is, for each aspect of a scene, including the plot, how often should important plot points occur? Too frequent, and the story can feel rushed. Too infrequent, and the reader may lose interest. So let me simplify that. Dialogue should get to the point, but you're allowed to spend time in the way it unfolds. So as long as it's moving it forward, good. Same thing with descriptions. If the descriptions move the plot forward, move the information forward, keep the momentum, you can sit in the description. You know, if it's through the experience of a character. The plot points themselves, when you're looking at the 27 plot points specifically, if you do a lot of plot points consistently, like it's just like boom, 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 it's like, whoa, that's overwhelming. Sometimes you need to sit in a plot point. That's why when I talk about it in my outlining video, some plot points can be 2 or 3 chapters long. The ordinary world doesn't have to be explored in one chapter. It can be, but depending on the genre, depending on what you're trying to do, sometimes you want those moments to breathe out. And that's why I call it the beginning, middle, and end chapters. So, like a midpoint conflict could have 3 chapters. You could have the beginning of the midpoint conflict, the substance of the midpoint conflict, and of course, the resolution to the midpoint conflict. So you can control pace that way as well. But we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into it. All right. Well, Thomas, now that you said all that, how do you control pacing in a scene? Well, that's a great question. A lot of what I'm going to say in this video will sound repetitive. Okay. The playlist and even other videos outside this playlist, uh, especially like outlining and characters, etc., will all have repetitive terms. I'm a teacher. I'm trying to teach. We learn by repetition. This is A, for learning purposes, and B, because writing is a collection of skills that develop your craft to better handle your writing. And those skills don't change names. And C, I try to let these videos come out ideas in a different way when I'm exploring them. I'll repeat that because I feel like my dyslexia took over. C, I try to let this video and other videos alike play out ideas in a different way when I'm exploring them with you. With that said, here's 4 ways you can control pacing in a scene. Now, before I move a little further, I do want to kind of touch on that a bit. The way I try to make this channel a learning channel and not just like these are 5 things you can do for pacing. I like to allow things to be broken down and explored, but also I like to do the real time examples in some of my videos. But the other thing is, writing is indeed a collection of skills and tools, and they are all the same. Pacing is pacing. The word pacing exists. How we explore pacing is you could do it with so many different variables. And that's where my channel comes into play, and this video where we're going to go into it, and then I'm going to show you real-time examples. Okay. Sentence length and structure. One of the most straightforward ways to control pacing is literally through sentence length, and structure. Woo. Short, choppy sentences and rapid dialogue can create a sense of urgency. In contrast, longer, flowing sentences with rich descriptions are ideal for slowing down the pace and allowing readers to sink into the emotional depth of a scene. For a high stakes moment, try quick, fragmented sentences to reflect the chaos and adrenaline. And for emotionally impactful moments, use more complex, descriptive sentences to help readers linger on the character's internal emotional experience. Now, with that said, though, these complex sentences that I'm talking about, which are have multiple movements, you can still have quick pace with multiple movement, with complex sentence structure. But it's how you create the rhythm with those commas and how you create the rhythm with the long sentences that can create pace. Because again, it's the information, it's the speed at which information is presented to you. So again, the more detailed you become, slows it down. So the more detail you go into to explore context, the slower it'll be. But a long sentence that doesn't spend time on the details but gives you enough context creates a faster pace. And we'll go over that. Action and dialogue does help control pacing. Pacing is influenced by what is happening and what is being said on the page. Action-packed sequences naturally should move faster because events happen in quick succession. However, to control pacing, think about how much action or dialogue you include and when. In a fast-paced scene, focus on external actions, minimal internal monologue, and keep the characters on the move. To slow down the pace, to add rhythm, add pauses and reflection, detailed description, and internal dialogue to help your reader fully experience what's happening. There's a difference between a big fight where it starts off and it's a little slow in the beginning, where they're maybe mouthing off to each other, and then their swords come in. and then you let them do some moves. Ding, 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 block, attack, roll out of the way, hold each other. Now we have a moment. Let's slow it down. Now we're in. There's some dialogue. Okay, now they're back to fighting. He pushes them off. The battle it disarms the person. Now we get to slow it down again, because what is the protagonist dealing with? The fact that they were disarmed, and how are they feeling and thinking? And now you're creating rhythm and movement and pace. But we'll go over that. Descriptive detail. I'm a fan of descriptive detail through the emotional experience of characters, meaning basically a POV is experiencing details. But when description is description for description's sake, it really bogs down the story. So that is one of the elements of pacing. And I will say, including or withholding description detail is going to manipulate your pacing. So if you want to slow things down and describe the setting, the sensory details, or the character's internal thoughts in more depth, that will indeed slow down your pacing. I think that should always be through the character, because it'll become something that has purpose. Remember, everything that you write should have purpose, because you're spending your word count. Now, these details allow the reader to basically immerse themselves within the moment and feel every nuance of what's happening. To quicken the pace through description, reduce the description to the bare essentials and focus on what's immediately important. This makes the scene feel more intimate and keeps the reader's attention on the present action. All right. Paragraphs and scene breaks. Using paragraphs and scene breaks strategically can also influence your pacing. When I say passages, of course, I mean prose. Short prose / passages and frequent breaks help keep a scene move quickly, while longer paragraphs allow readers to slow down and absorb more information. You can also use a scene break to create a pause, a beat, or of anticipation before even diving into the next moment. Okay, let me get into that a little bit. So I talk about logical narrative movement. Every sentence, every passage or dialogue, chapters, scenes, they all need logical narrative movement. Okay, each thing needs to move into the other logically. Everything must be attached to the thing before it. So the first sentence can set something up, but you definitely have to qualify that information in the following sentence. Just like the passage itself needs to be qualified in the moment after that. However, some people will write a long passage, and that passage itself might have more than one true movement. Okay, so if a passage starts with me entering a room, and it's how I enter the room and maybe describing the room, but then within that same passage, it's going into the internal elements, and I'm focused on that for the next 2 or 3 sentences. And then maybe the last couple sentences is maybe me stepping to the bar and ordering something. That passage could be 3 prose. You know what I'm saying? I could break that up into 3 specific movements: the entering and description, the internal, and then, of course, the next action, which is going to the bar. So you have to look at passages in a sense of movements, and that'll help you create pacing as well, because that long passage that feels slow and drawn out now became faster pace. It's the same information. It's literally the same information. I just broke up the movement beats. So the reader is now experiencing the entrance, and then they're experiencing the emotion, and then they're experiencing the action. And that is a form of controlling pace. So again, just because the information is the same word count, it could be 100 words. The word count itself does not really affect the pacing. It's how the reader is experiencing that information. It's the speed at which information is presented, or unfolds, right? So if it's one long, thick passage at 100 words, that's going to feel slow and condensed and but if you break them into movements, it now allows it to feel quicker. Okay. There's also something I talk about in my videos because I have I come from the movie and television industry. Use the camera to control the pacing. And what this means is think of a fake camera within the scene. All right. And let's talk about that. The camera concept that you often hear me talk about on my channel is Really great for controlling pace in scenes. Where is the camera focused? Is it a close up or a long shot, to establish the scene? Are we establishing setting, location, or are we bringing something very specific to the attention of the reader? I love film, I love television, and therefore, and theater. Uh, and this is the way I like to explore the writing process of creating a narrative in a novel. Um, if you've ever seen any examples, especially when I do them in real time, I like to write cinematically where things unfold and it creates a fast pace read, even when I slow down the pace itself. Okay. In a film, when the narrative needs you to know something, they let you see it. When a character needs to react to what's being said, we see it on the screen with a close up. Sometimes we get nice wide shots during a car chase, and still each frame flies by with quick cuts. More importantly, sometimes we have an establishing shot or a medium shot where we don't get to see the close up expressions because it's not narratively important that we see someone going to a comment. And yes, cuts, cuts. When you see cuts in a shot, cuts are a wonderful way to look at passages. I talked about logical narrative movement. So, cuts are a way to explore the movement in adjusting the pace of a scene, your pages, and even your chapters. Watch a film and see how often and why they're cutting away from something. What is the context they're establishing for you to know, and what specific information are they showing you? Longer takes, one shots, and even quick cuts control the pacing of what information you're being presented with. More importantly, um, cuts help break pattern. So it's a pattern interrupt. When we have a cut, I don't do cuts on this, but one of the things they talk about YouTube, they say you should cut and break up and like cut all the fluff out. And those static cuts, those zoom in, zoom outs, those are pattern interrupts. And that keeps you naturally in the moment. That's why I mentioned that long paragraph of 100 words. If you break it up into 3 movements of entering, emotion, and then action, that creates the pattern interrupt to allow the reader to keep going subconsciously. But how does the camera idea of the camera work? Well, a long take of a close up on a character is a chance to let their behavior and emotion breathe in the moment. In a novel, this is going into the character's emotions, thoughts, and ideas. So if you watch a movie or show and somebody is speaking, but the actual shot is on someone listening, that is the same as in a novel, taking in the emotional truth of what they're experiencing with the dialogue. All right. So in a novel, this is going to be where you go into the character's emotions, their thoughts, and their ideas. Sometimes you'll see a quick establishing shot of an office building or cityscape to let the audience know, hey, they're in New York, or hey, they're at a police station. In a novel, this is a quick description that opens a scene. All right. Where it might be like, the building on 4th Street loomed over them as they entered. And that's all you need. All right. Or it's been a while. It has been a while since they stood before the building on 4th Street. Or, entering the office. Like sometimes it doesn't matter what the building looks like. However, sometimes in film or television, you'll see a character sitting quiet, looking out at the scene, like looking out at the park. And the first shot would be on the character with a close up. Then it cuts to what they're looking at and still no words. In a novel, this is a chance to begin with a character sitting, letting the reader know what's going on with them internally, then cutting to the wide shot of the setting. This is your chance to describe in detail what the character sees. Of course, you're not going to write, they looked out to the blank, blank, blank. You don't have to do that since you can just get to the description. They sat and spoke in silence, resting after the long journey as they settled into the camp. Their empty bowl of broth steamed from the cup held tight in their hand, and the world paused in the distance. Oranges merged in the yellow and blues of day sky, forming into night. Stars peeked out from the horizon, fluttering around the moon. So, what would that look like on screen? Let's do that. Let me show you that quick moment on screen. Let me just get it set up for you. Oranges, oranges. Okay, boop. Broth. Broth, broth, broth. All right, all right, all right. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it like they do on Discovery Channel. Yeah, you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals. So what you do on Discovery Channel? Yeah. All right. So we start on this is a close up. This is the idea of using the camera as starting as a close up, as if right now you see me. This is the close up, and imagine the shot on me, and I'm just staring out like this, as if I'm looking at something. And it would say, "They sat and spoke in silence, resting after the long journey as they settled into the camp. Their empty bowl of broth steamed from the cup held tight in her hand, and the world paused in the distance." Now we could take this shot, and literally the logical narrative movement can bring us from the internal to the external of what it is they are staring at, because they sat and spoke in silence, resting. Okay. And now the next passage can literally just present the detail. Oranges merged in the yellow and blue. Orange merged in the yellow and blues of day sky, forming into night. Stars peeked out from the horizon, fluttering around the moon. Right. And then you could jump away. Krista, her friend said, stepping closer. And now that cuts her from the moment, and that's a natural transition. All right. And now we can create a new movement. All right. Krista, her friend said, stepping closer. Snapping her. Wait, I wouldn't say that. I'm just stepping closer. All right. And then, her shoulders relaxed. Her shoulders relaxed. All right, the shoulder relaxed, and her thoughts stayed a moment longer before taking the last sip of broth. Yeah, and we can just say Krista's thoughts stayed a little longer. Okay. Right, and then you could be like, oh, arches up. All right, so maybe she was doing the first watch. All right, anyway, so there's an example of allowing different movements create the pace. But this is slowed down and we're internal. And then what are we looking at, right? However, again, if this was one long passage, there you go, right? Okay, this creates a slower pace. However, just doing this breaks up the pace, and now it becomes a quicker pace, even though we are having a slower moment. All right. Then this speeds up a little bit. This is a quick rhythm change. Krista, her friend said, stepping closer. Her shoulders relaxed, and Krista's thoughts stayed a moment longer before taking the last sip of broth. My watch is up. Okay. That creates a rhythm of movement. All right. With that said, let's actually go up here and let's go into the example. All right. I'm going to take myself off the screen because clear. Wait. I could go over here. All right. Great. Okay. So let's go over sentence length and structure first. I'm going to just map out the colors a little bit. Okay. So let's look at the lengths of the sentences. This is an example I worked out here. Okay, the unknown. Uh, Come on. Uno momento, por favor. Uno momento. All right. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm only going to do this first paragraph for the sentence. Sentence rhythm. Sentence rhythm. She pushed on. She pushed on. All right, and then of course, bloop. Okay. All right. Mara's feet pounded against the forest floor. Breath raged as branches whipped past her face. Twigs snapped from behind her, growing closer in the distance. She didn't allow it to call her to look back. The unknown path ahead twisted, challenging her. Left or right? She veered left, her shoulder grazing the rough bark of a tree, and stumbled. No time fall. No time to fail. No time to fall. Yeah. No time to fall. She pushed on, finding her balance against her heart, hammering beneath her chest. Each breath burned, every step heavier than the last. Okay. So this has the sentence lengths. The first couple allow us to kind of get into the moment. Okay. Twig snapped. Right. And then we're going to start breaking up the rhythm. So the unknown path ahead twisted, challenging her. That's internal. Left or right? This is her internal. She veered left. Now we're back to physical. Her shoulder grazing the rough bark of the tree and stumbled. Now, see these commas, this complex sense? She veered left. Her shoulder grazing the rough bark of the tree and stumbled. That keeps the movement going. It's still quick pace, even though it's a long sentence. No time to fall. That becomes internal. She pushed on, finding her balance against her heart hammering beneath her chest. Each breath burned, every step heavier than the last. All right. So that creates movement and by the way, this is all one movement, right? Because this is her running. She's running, she's running, she's experiencing the running, she's still in the running. She hurt herself, no time to fall. She pushed on, every breath burned. All right. Now the change is going to happen. A blast of white light filled over her face as the forest opened up, revealing a small clearing bathed in silver moonlight. So the change goes from her running to her experiencing an opening. So it changes. And look, it's just two sentences. But they're long because we want to slow it down. We just ran through a fast-paced, all right, a fast-paced action moment. And now we get to breathe. A blast of white light filled over her face as the forest opened up, revealing a small clearing bathed in silver moonlight. Mara skipped to a stop. A few rocks tumbled off the cliff, pushed by her feet before coming to a halt. So let's go over something real quick, all right? I talked about how context, we can go deeper into context, or we could allow context to keep us moving. Mara's feet pounded against the forest floor. That's one piece of information. Breathe, breath, breath, ragged as branches whipped past her. Okay. So that's two pieces of information, but we're not going into the detail of that. We're not going into Mara's feet pounded against the forest floor. We're not describing the forest floor, and we're not describing what she's wearing. We're not describing what she's looking like, whatever. All right. So we're keeping the information straight to the point to keep it moving. Breath ragged as branches whipped past her face. Okay. Twigs snapped from behind her, growing closer in the distance. She didn't allow it to call her to look back. We don't define any of these things. We just explain enough to continue to keep the context moving forward. The unknown path ahead twisted, challenging her. Again, these are two pieces of information. The unknown path ahead twisted, and it challenged her. Okay, so it's external and internal, but we're not going into the depth of how it twisted. We're not going into depth of the path. We're not describing the path. So that's what keeps the pace quick, left or right. right? This is internal. She veered left. She made a choice, right? She's thinking, where do I go, left or right? We don't have to say she thought about it and she looked left and right. No, left or right. She veered left. She made a choice. Her shoulder grazing the rough bark of the tree and stumbled. She veered left and stumbled. She veered left, her shoulder grazing the rough bark of the tree and stumbled. There are three pieces of movement, three pieces of information, but nothing's being described. We are just being told. We are seeing it unfold. Don't get me. This is showing. We're watching it unfold, right? We're seeing it unfold, but we're not going into depth, and that's what maintains a fast pace. Especially because these sentences are now getting. We went from two long sentences to now we're breaking up the pattern of sentences. She pushed on, finding her balance against her heart hammering beneath her chest. Her breath burned every step heavier. Now, watch the difference between what we just read and these two sentences. A blast of white light filled over her face as the forest opened up, revealing a small clearing bathed in silver moonlight. So, what's happening here is I could have just wrote, right? She entered or the forest opened up, revealing the bright moon in the sky. That would have been a faster pace. But the slowdown is we're now describing what it is that she's seeing. We're describing the experience. A blast of white light filled over her face. So that's saying that when she came out of the forest, the moonlight was so bright it hit her hard, revealing a small clearing bathed in silver moonlight. The reason that becomes a slower pace is because now we are going into the description of things. We're letting things kind of work out. Mara skipped to a stop. A few rocks tumbled off the cliff, pushed by her feet, before coming to a halt. This speeds up a little bit more, even though it's a long sentence. But the reason is because we're not describing anything. If I wrote Mara skipped to sand slipped under her feet as she skipped to a stop. A few rocks tumbled off the cliff, rattling as they pummeled down the side of the large mountainside. The rocks pushed by her feet before she hauled. She slid to a struggling stop or a struggling halt. Now that becomes slower because we're describing the things, but that is the main takeaway to pace, because remember, it's the speed at which information is presented. If we go into the detail of things, it's a slower pace. If we give enough information for context to keep it moving, that is a faster pace. And as you can see, there are two sentences right here that show you slow and then show you fast pace. Action and dialogue. So again, this is action packed. That keeps the pace kind of going, right? I don't have dialogue here, so just keep that in mind. Descriptive details. Again, this was descriptive. And this was action. Okay. Let's see. Scene breaks and pauses. I don't really have any scene breaks or pauses in this example, but using the narrative and character experiences to describe moments, allowing beats and sentences to do more than one thing. Okay. We talked about this many times. So every sentence of dialogue or passage or prose or description or anything, every single sentence needs to have one or more of these three elements: plot, character development, or world building. So it either has to move the plot forward, develop the character in some way through their experiences and choices, or elaborate on the world. So this is her experience. So this is character driven, but it's also plot, because forest floor, breathing rain, it has branches. So the plot is she's moving, and this is what she's experiencing. Okay. Twig snapped from behind her, growing closer in the distance. She didn't allow it to call her back to her. So this is both plot and character. The unknown path ahead twisted, challenging her. That's character. The unknown path twisted. The twisted is plot because it's details of what's unfolding. Left or right, that's character. She veered left, that's plot. Her shoulder grazing the rough bark of a tree. That's character, and stumbled. Okay, because her choice led to a consequence. No time to fall. She pushed on, finding her balance against her heart, hammering beneath her chest. Okay, well, there we go. That's character. Every breath burned, every step heavier than the last. Every breath burned, every step heavier than the last. This is character because she's developing. She's having a consequence to her experience. Okay. So that's what that means. And logical narrative movement. So we kind of talked about that. Mara's feet pounded against the forest floor, breath ragged as branches whipped past her head. All right. So branches whipped past her face. We have to qualify that, or we could qualify her feet pounding against the forest floor, or we could qualify her breath. What did we choose? Twigs snapped from behind her, growing closer in the distance. She didn't allow it to call her back. So, what is happening there? We chose to qualify the fact that she is running. So it's Mara's feet pounded against the forest floor, breath ragged as branches whipped past her. The logical narrative movement here now actually becomes the substance of that sentence. The plot is suggesting that she is running. So now we are qualifying that she is running and that somebody is chasing her. Twig snapped from behind her, growing closer in distance. She didn't allow it to call her back. All right. So now we're going to qualify where she's running. Okay. Because we know she is running, but the unknown path ahead twisted, challenging her. Okay. So we know that it snapped behind her. We know that she's running from somebody. It is a forest. So all this is coming into the unknown path ahead, twisted, challenging her. Right. Left or right. She veered left. Okay. The challenge is qualified. Do I go left or do I go right? Well, she chose to go left, which qualifies left or right. And what is the consequence to that? Her shoulder grazed the rough bark of a tree and stumbled. Because she stumbled, her internal thought logically is no time to fall. Because she has no time to fall, she pushed on, finding her balance against her heart hammering beneath her chest. Physically being affected, she has a physical consequence to everything. So that means each breath burned, every step heavier than the last. All right. Now, the logical narrative movement is, where is this leading her to? The opening of the forest where she is blasted with the moonlight, and because she experiences this, the logical narrative movement, and she has to react. The consequences, she has to stop, and she almost falls. Okay, and we could go on. All right, now that she is at the edge and she can't run forward, and someone is chasing her, the logical narrative movement is that she has to do what? She has to find cover. So her eyes darted around for cover. The silence echoed in the pounding pulse in her ears. She dove behind a falling log, pulling her knees to her chest. The minutes stretched, each second an eternity, as she fought to quiet her breathing. All of this, okay, is considered fast pace. And the reason is because everything is explained enough for context to keep it moving. Her eyes dart around for cover. We don't explain that. The silence echoed in the pounding pulse in her ears. This could be considered a slower moment because we are literally describing the silence echoed in the pounding pulse in her ears. So we're hearing a heartbeat. Okay. She dove behind a fallen log. That's fast pace. It's enough context to know what is happening. Pulling her knees to her chest is just enough. By the way, this is qualifying what she did after she went behind the log. Now we're going to slow it down. The minutes stretched, each second an eternity, as she fought to quiet her breathing, because that describes the experience, the moment. All right. And this is just an example of using a rhythm. This is quick. Her her eyes darted around for cover. Then we slow it a second. The silence echoed in the pounding pulse in her ears. She dove behind a fallen log, pulling her knees to her chest. The minutes stretched, which is enough context that it's like taking forever. But now we're gonna explore that moment in the slow position. And then finally, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. That's quick. She closed her eyes, counting her breaths. That is quick. I know, Tutu. Two. Come here, baby. 1, 2, 3. This is also quick, right? Because she's counting. Or more importantly, the seconds are, counting her breaths, right? So she closed her eyes, counting her breaths. The sound of footsteps receded, fading into the distance. This is a little slower. And that's where rhythm comes in. So a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. This is, I would say, a little slower than fast. She closed her eyes, counting her breaths as fast. So it's slow, fast, fast. Then we slow down again. The sound of footsteps receding, fading into the distance. Relief washed over her, leaving her trembling. She opened her eyes, tears blurring the sight of the stars above. Oh, poor girl. For now, she was safe. Whoop. Whoop. Whoopsie. And there you go. Movement, movement, movement. All right. Okay, let's go to final thoughts. Let's get those final thoughts in, because that's why we're here. Pacing is a tool that takes time to master, but it's also one of the most rewarding aspects of writing, is controlling the movement of the reader's experience. By experimenting with sentence lengths, action descriptions, slowing things down, logical narrative movements, and of course, giving the story, a chance to emotionally be experienced through the character, your pacing will become a part of the reader's experience and not just something that is happening. Remember, there is no right and wrong, though. Each scene is an opportunity to discover your voice and to play with the balance of tension, release, slower paces. Where do you want to dive into? Where do you want to become descriptive? As you can see in the example that we showed, some moments had a mixture of fast pace with a slow tag, right, for the complex sentence. Some longer sentences had fast pace because it was just keeping the context clear enough to move the story, the experience forward. But you're allowed to, in between, within a passage, quick pace, slow pace, quick, 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 slow, quick, slow. You're allowed to do that. You're also allowed to go slow, 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 or quick, 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 quick. But you have to remember, if you continue to just go quick, 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 it becomes exhausting, and it's just like it is disruptive. But again, if it's slow, 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 if it was just like, her legs ached and strained with each step, trying to find herself, her heart was beating and calling to her and reminding her that of her children at home, and if she didn't make it out of these, right now, it's like, imagine that was just like, sometimes you just want to get through the moment and then allow moments to breathe and then slowly unfold the truth of what's going on. But more importantly, give yourself some time to practice this. Pacing is something you got to learn to do. So when you're working on a scene, every sentence, right, should be moving something. It should have logical narrative movement. It should be moving the plot forward. It should be moving the character development. It should be something, right? But take your pass, like write your pass, and I say it all the time. First and second drafts, just write whatever. Just get it out of your brain. But when you're doing the work, the writing part, the part that makes you a writer, which is the work, and like organizing things and getting things to be clear and make sense and have some, depth, you want to look at it and be like, am I describing too much? Am I allowing things to move a little bit? Is this part supposed to have a little bit more urgency? And am I just staying too deep inside the moment? So it's your job to sort of kind of like break that up and figure that out. When you're looking at passages too, make sure that the passages are broken up into logical narrative movement passages, and that the prose themselves aren't just these huge chunks of information, because you can increase the pacing of the experience by saying, oh wait, I could break these up. And that is something that a lot of my clients will present to me, and I'll go, look, you just have to a lot of these paragraphs just need to be broken up, and you don't have to add or subtract any words. But that will help the reading experience. So that's something to think about. All right. With that said, the next video in this series will all be about mastering the scene. Okay, a step-by-step guide to mapping out the beats and flow of a scene. So it will be touching on outlining the scene basically to ensure a logical and engaging progression. Question. Do you find that you write quick pace or slow pace naturally and realize that that is something that you lean into too much? Or do you feel you have control over your pacing? Let us know in the comments below. And either or, how do you deal with it? If you haven't done it so already and you like what you've been watching, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. Other than that, as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.